Hey, it's Stephanie Ferrara here, your empowered creativity coach. As an entrepreneur, I learned a while back that it was so hard to continue doing this thing all alone. And I went out and sought out help. I sought out groups of women who could help me, and I sought out a coach who could directly impact my business by helping me by seeing those things that I just couldn't see for myself. As a business coach, you might be thinking, why do you need a business coach? Well, because we all have those things that we can't see, that we're too close to it and too attached to it. And we need somebody who can really speak into that and help us see, whether it's see something bigger, see something different, whatever that may be. So as a Christ-centered business coach, I help women entrepreneurs who are in the early stages of their business to build and create strong foundations for a healthy, thriving, God-centered, and God-driven business. Now, for me, I speak very openly about my faith in my business. That's just who I am, and it's very hard for me to have almost any conversation that doesn't somehow tie back to or revolve around or come back to God and Jesus and my relationship with the Holy Spirit, prayer, something. Somehow it's going to come into the conversation. That may not be you, and that's perfectly okay. Just because I do doesn't mean you have to. But one of the things that I have learned is that whether I'm speaking about God in my business, and this is something I learned back when I was still working in the corporate office. I didn't talk about God all the time, but I still went to work and learned and asked for help from the Holy Spirit. I let God lead me in my work, and that's really what it's all about. It's that back end side of things and letting God lead and learning to hear his voice, hear his direction, be obedient, and move forward. And that's really what my coaching is about, is helping you with creating those firm foundations. And it's not just spiritual even. We've got real meat in there of how to create your brand, define your niche, create your signature system that may go on to be your coaching program or your course or just your customer experience with who you're doing business with. And all of those things are so very important. But the foundation of what I do is around letting God lead me in that and teaching others to do the same. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Heather Oynes. She is a Christian financial coach, and she helps people who are learning to steward what they have and steward it well. She coaches women in financial management, in creating a budget. And what I love, and you'll hear this in the discussion that we have today, is that a budget is not restrictive. It actually gives you control and freedom. And I'm excited for you to hear her take and her point of view on that precisely. Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining me on the Empowered Creativity Show today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about your business and who you serve?
Hi, Stephanie. Yes, thank you so much. So I am Heather Oynes, and I am a Christian financial coach. I help women who really desire to be a great steward of their finances, the way that God calls them to be. But at the same time, they feel kind of out of control. They feel like the finances are more stressful, less organized than they should be. And then ultimately, my goal is just to decrease that financial stress, help them find that organization, and then just really get into a groove, feeling confident that they're saving what they need to be saving, that they can give more, give what they want to give. Um, and I mean, like I said, just be a great steward of what God has provided as an income. So that's my business. Now, personally, I am married. I've got 3 little boys, ages 7, and my twins are 5. And so that is a big part of my business as far as, wanting to have flexibility with family life and to be there for my family.
I think that's one of our goals or one of the goals for a lot of us as entrepreneurs is to just have more time availability for the things outside of work, right?
Yes, definitely.
So I know you didn't start out in financial coaching. You have a very different background. Why don't you tell us about where you started and kind of
Yes.
that defining moment? What made you decide it's time to stop that and go into financial coaching?
Yes. So actually, I was a pharmacist. I still am a pharmacist, just not practicing for the last 11 years. And it was probably, I think it was the end of 2016. I felt like God started calling me into my passion, which is budgeting, personal finance management, all of that, and to really serve others in that. So I still was practicing as a pharmacist up until the end of last year, 2019. I felt God calling me out of it, and it wasn't so much my passion anymore. And not only that, it was just super stressful. It wasn't fulfilling anymore. I was working more hours than I wanted to be. And honestly, it just came down to the paycheck wasn't worth it anymore. And because of, I mean, that's what kept me there probably the last 2 years. And part of it was my husband wanted to keep the paycheck too. But so basically, what happened was I finally just decided that it's time to make this leap. It's time to pursue my passion. I could feel God leading me out of that situation and into financial coaching. And so now I get to do what I love. I get to serve others in a way that I'm incredibly passionate about. And because of the way that we learn to manage finances, even early on, according to biblical principles, that I was able to take that leap and take that drop in income for a little while and go ahead and do that. So I'm super excited about that, super passionate about that. And that's one of the things I love about financial coaching is that I get to help others step into what God has called them as well. I get to help the money line up with those goals.
That's great. And I know that biblical money stewardship, that stewardship, that word stewardship means so much more than just financial. It means, kind of covers all gamuts of life. Um, so right now, if we're thinking about right now, these times at this moment that we're in, people have lost jobs, others have had to take a pay cut. I know somebody personally had to take a pay cut and take on more responsibility. Some other people who they were rotating who was going to be in the office, but they took on more responsibility. And then there's others that just couldn't go in. Some personal friends of mine where their particular type of business was totally shut down until this week. What tips would you give? And I know this is like really broad because probably the tips you would have given us 2 months ago are very different from what you would tell us right now, almost about like, what do you do to continue stewarding your money well, to continue to try to save and plan for the future when things seem so uncertain right now?
Right. Yeah, that is a very big question. And um, just really quickly before I kind of get into more of like the specifics, I do want to mention for a while, I was very much recommending, to be pretty aggressive on your debt payoff goals. So a lot of people were trying to pay off debt and get to a point, become debt free and have more freedom when it comes to the money. But at this point, I would say we're in a season now where it's more important to save, or at least to have, more of a savings account than we've ever had before. So I would absolutely prioritize saving at this point. I just kind of want to say that off the bat. But then I have three things that I just really want to say regarding your question, and just the steps and the things that I would think about currently as we continue into our new normal, whatever that kind of looks like. It's different for everyone. And we don't really know what that looks like yet either. So, but the first thing, and it does involve our money, but more than anything, I want people to know where their hope and ultimately where their provision or income comes from. We know that God's going to provide. Philippians 4:19 says, "And my God will supply all your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus." And I'm sure you've seen, even in those examples you gave me, we haven't talked about it, but I'm sure that you've seen the Lord provide to their families in ways that might not have been provision before. So it might not have been an income, or it might not have been an income from the same thing, or from the same, job that they were doing. But I just, with that, if we can remember that it's God who provides, obviously we're going to do our part. We're going to work. We're going to do what we can, and step into the calling, that He has for us to earn an income. But just to remember that ultimately He's in control, and that's where our provision comes from. I think that can really help lessen the stress and the worry, especially in this time. Just that one verse, Philippians 4:19, can be so powerful right now. As we're thinking about that too, I think it's been a time where people are realizing, like, either maybe I don't want to work in the area that I'm working in. Maybe I'm supposed to pursue something differently, or maybe it just looks different than it ever has before. Like, job roles are changing. Even careers, it could be a career change for you, kind of just like I did, except before COVID-19. Whatever that is, like, I feel like this is the time for us to really think about that and pray over that, and just, decide, like, how does God want me to serve and yet earn an income from that? I think that's super powerful.
I'm just thinking about one friend of mine who, he's a hairdresser. And so there has been this time when he hasn't been able to do anything. Right. And his wife works in food service, and she hasn't been able to do anything. As a bartender, actually hasn't been able to do anything, and they've been able to shift here and there. And he kind of resurrected an old business that he had that was more of a handyman type business. And he had people that out of the blue, as he kind of had the thought, well, maybe I could do that for now. People started calling him. Hey, do you think you could come take care of? It's like God was putting him on others' hearts of, he's available now. He used to do this kind of stuff for you. Call him and see if he can come do it now that the salon's not open. And
Yes.
and so he and I had that conversation of God's just kind of opened up some doors during this time to
Yep.
still provide.
Right. I just love that. That is so neat. Yeah. The Lord has blessed each of us with many different skill sets and even knowledge. And it's just a matter of what can we do with that in order for Him to provide for us through an income. So I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
So what would your second tip for us today be?
Yes. So the second tip is to always have a plan. A lot of times with our money, we tend to let the money happen. We don't really plan as proactively as we should. And this verse, I actually kind of just stumbled upon this verse recently, and it makes me laugh, but it's also super just powerful in making us want to actually do the work, I guess. So it's Proverbs 27:3, and it's, be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds. So obviously that's not the way that most of us, have an income now or have provision now.
Right.
But I would kind of adjust it and say, be diligent to know the state of your finances and attend to your budgets. So the budget is our plan when it comes to our money. It's not always the most fun thing for people to do or even to think about. One of the things that can help is, instead of thinking about it as a budget, you could call it something different that just is a little more exciting to you.
I know some people call it a spending plan. And so instead of budget, which seems very limited, it's like, no, this is how I'm going to spend my money. I'm planning how I'll spend it. So they call it a spending plan instead of a budget.
Exactly. Yes. And I love that. So yeah, definitely just call, cash flow plan. I like that because it implies you have cash, which is exciting. And then, it's flowing, you're making it do things. And ultimately you're hopefully going to be able to make it to do the things that you value the most, that glorify God. You can give all of those things. So it makes it a little more fun. But yes, the tip with this is just to plan ahead, have that proactive budget, spending plan, whatever it is, in place. I think we were all kind of, when this happened, I mean, overnight, right? We were all kind of just wondering, like, wow, what's next? And just being able to know what our finances look like, to, we get to have control when we have a budget. You get to look at the money you have and you get to say, okay, this is where it's going. And when you actually are aware of your numbers, it can change a lot. It changes so much. And a lot of people, we really do just let money happen to us and just let we spend when we want to, for the most part. And then later on, we realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And I feel really guilty about that now. Whereas a budget can help, or a spending plan can help rein that in and give us control, which is just something that we're all wanting right now, right? We really want control over something in our lives. And then it also allows us to have freedom, because we are actually free to spend on what God calls us to spend on, and things for us to enjoy. But at the same time, it gives us those boundaries that we need so that we don't feel chained to the money, basically, or to the debt or whatever it is. So I love that the budget is what keeps you in control. And something just to mention really quickly, I mentioned saving right off the bat, because I want everybody to know that now is the time really to pay attention to your savings, to try to beef up that savings a little more. Prioritize that over paying extra on your debt right now. But the other part is giving. Like, if you're still making an income, just remember to tithe off the top. Like, even though we're not meeting in church, it's so important right now to give online, mail a check-in if you have to, whatever it is. If you're making that income, continue your tithing. That's just a huge part of our money, right? Of how our money should always be, but especially right now, we want to continue to support our church.
Yeah, that's so important to not adjust anything. It may be that the amount adjusts because you're still doing percentage,
Yes.
but not to cut it out totally. And I know for me personally, that's one of your tip around readjusting how you're doing versus as far as paying down debt versus savings. I know that's one of the things that I've done this month,
Yes.
last month rather. Was to just adjust some of that and say, what, that's not priority right now. This is, for now, I need to, think about things a little bit differently for a short time.
Yeah.
And so, thankfully with my business, it hasn't been majorly interrupted or anything like that. I'm already working online, I already meet with people online. So the not being able to meet in person hasn't been an issue. And thankfully, actually, my business has grown during this time as people are looking at new ways of doing things. And so, I'm praying that continues as people are opening up and thinking about new ways of doing things and everything. And so I think, but yeah, for me personally, giving hasn't stopped, and definitely, that adjustment of where I'm focusing my dollars right now.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, you're still in control. And I truly believe too, because you've continued that giving, God is continuing to bless you and, possibly provide you even more business. That's not why we give, obviously,
Right.
but it's a
Mm-hmm.
part of it. And he recognizes that. And so that's really neat.
Yeah. And I think the big thing there, just talking about that budget versus spending plan, cash flow plan, or whatever, so many people think of it, and this is the word that I wrote down was punitive. It's not punitive. It gives you control and freedom, because you're not, you can say, I'm going to budget $50 for clothes this month or whatever. And so if that's something that's important to you, is being able to stay fresh and stay up to date and everything, be able to put $50 or $100 into that budget and say, well, I have that. And so I can spend that, and I don't spend it and then feel, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. You're not going through all that guilt, because it's like, no, I planned this, and now I can do it. And you could do it with confidence. You can spend that with confidence because you've budgeted the other, necessities of food and gas and your home and everything like that already out. And so it's not so random when you're like, oh, I think I want to buy that shirt or whatever.
Yes, there is that. There's so much freedom in that. And even I'll kind of jump into, as a married couple, sometimes we can judge what our spouse is spending, right? So it's like, if we both have our own separate spending money, like just for what we want to enjoy, then that can actually lessen a lot of the tension in our marriage when it comes to spending.
I know that financial stress is one of the number one issues within marriages and everything, and that's something, when my husband and I got married, from the very beginning, we're like, okay, we don't want to have that. So we have 3 accounts. We have our joint account, where those big things, that, we keep a roof over our head and we keep the lights on, we keep all of that. That's in that joint account. And then we have separate accounts that are ours. So we both contribute to the joint account, and then other things come so I don't have to question what he's doing, and then he doesn't have to question what I'm doing. As long as at the end of the month, everything's still happening, we're good.
You're working as a team. I love that. Yeah, sometimes that can be the absolute hardest part of dealing with our finances, is trying to get our husband on board. So yes, y'all definitely got off to a really good start with that. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, and gone are the days. I think about my parents and how they used to manage the checkbook, right? And it was, you'd write a check and then you'd flip it over and you'd write the amount on the back of the check. Well, one person has a checkbook and the other person has a checkbook, and there was no QuickBooks, there was nothing like that. But when they were doing that kind of stuff, and so I think our online tools help us stay in sync as well. We know what's going on, and you can keep track of it so much easier today than just 20 years ago even.
Right. That's very true. We have it more in real time than ever before.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So do you have one more tip for us?
Yes, and it is money related, but I think more than anything, it's even life related. And especially when it comes to our business and in earning money and all of that. We all know the verse, Philippians 4:13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength, which is wonderful right now to, keep that in mind. But what's not talked about and what's not memorized enough is the two verses before it. So Philippians 4:11 and 12. And Paul is saying, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So I think finding contentment in every aspect of our lives, but especially when it comes to the money, and especially right now when there's so much uncertainty, incomes are all over the place or even non-existent for a time. It's just, if we can truly find contentment and be grateful for the things that we do have, that's just going to change everything for us. And that can even open up opportunities, because we're not as stressed, we're not as worried. We know that God's going to provide, and we can absolutely be content with the things that we already have, that the blessings that he's already given us.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know for so many of us, it can be hard to be content, especially during hard times, right? Especially, it's one thing when everything's going well and there aren't any major hiccups in the road and everything. But when things are hard, when things change, just even change, even if it's not hard, just change can cause that discontent, which then feeds into so many other anxieties and worries and everything.
Yes, the change, and change that feels so far out of our control. It's very, very easy to not find that contentment.
You and I were talking earlier, and you just started a new Facebook group. You want to tell us about that? It's called Created for More. So you've piqued my interest with the title, definitely.
Yes. So I did. It's interesting that we're having this interview today, because I just started it this week. So I would love to invite your audience to join. It is Created for More. And it is just it's a financial stewardship group. So we really zone in on biblical finance and what God says about money, how we can steward it better, tips and tricks to do that, all of those things. But more than anything, it's about, when it comes to our money and even our lives, like, we were created for more. We were created for more freedom, like true freedom that only comes from the Lord. And we were created for more peace. Like, our lives are not to be as stressful and, everything's so worrisome. And we truly were created for more peace. And there's just so many more things that we were created for. We were created for more than enough. We always feel like, especially with our money, there's never enough. And we were created for more than that. And so that's really, my heart when it comes to this group. And your audience is really probably very they're probably the perfect people to be in this group because they are go-getters. They have their business. They know they're created for more. And they just know that they want to steward their money for the Lord and as He calls us to do. And really, there's a lot missing when it comes to the way the world says to manage our money. And God calls us to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And so that's my goal in this group, is to just truly start thinking about money from a more biblical perspective and just to help us all steward it better.
I love that. So your ideal person, your ideal person to be in that group is women who are in business, they're going after something more, or career women,
Yes.
who know that like there's more, and I know like Dave Ramsey says, live like nobody else today so that you can live like nobody else tomorrow, right? And so
yes. And there's some of that, but there's more to it than
yes,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, it can be a woman, an entrepreneurial woman who has her own business, or somebody in a corporate position. In general, I would say a working Christian woman who desires for more when it comes to her finances and even her marriage, because I feel like money issues and marriage are so closely entwined. And that's a really big part of our marriages. So that's one of the big things that I help my clients with, is even if their husband is not on board, that they can do some things themselves just to improve their situation and even to eventually get their husbands on board.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I like to ask my guests is, what does it mean to you to let God lead? And I know we've talked a lot about that already, but for you personally, what does it mean to you to let God lead?
Yes. So my spiritual life, I will say, improved greatly whenever I quit my job as a pharmacist. And so that truly, just taking away the security of that paycheck, and even the security of like having a job every day and, the paycheck every 2 weeks, and knowing that was like basically a stable way that God was providing, I all of a sudden had to rely on Him completely. It was completely up to Him to give me creativity, to open doors for me. And I feel like a lot of that was, I keep using this word, but good stewardship. And He was showing me that in order to be a good steward, there's things that I need to do. And that can also include letting go of some things. And so that was a big thing I had to let go. There's other things I'm having to let go of too. But in that, I'm letting Him lead. And He is my source of comfort and confidence each day now. And that, especially as an entrepreneur, your clients know, your audience knows that it is an up and down journey as an entrepreneur. And so just knowing that there's that one, source of stability, that He's with us constantly, day in and day out, and He's for us. God is within her, she will not fail. And that is just so powerful.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm always encouraged by the answers that I hear on that question, definitely. And encouraged just, hearing the journey that others have gone through to go from what they were doing previously, whether that was, a stay-at-home mom, or whether that was somebody in the corporate world, but doing something else to finally, like letting God lead them into that path of their dream and the passion, and being able to start their new business, and really just taking off with the dream, right? Holding on to that dream and say, I know I can make this happen. And it's always so encouraging to hear the stories and hear that, being able to hear that hope is really awesome. So thank you so much. How can we connect with you? Aside from the Facebook group, do you have another, Facebook, Instagram? What are other ways that we can connect with you?
Yes. So I'm not on Instagram yet. Well, I'm on there, but I'm not doing anything on there. So I do, Facebook is my main way. If anybody wants to reach out personally, absolutely get in touch with me by email. It's just my name, heatheroynes@gmail.com. But I also have another group on Facebook that's pretty active and pretty engaged. It's just not necessarily the people that I'm currently trying to talk to. Not all of them are. So they can join that group as well. It's Money Savvy Moms Living for Him.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Your tips were awesome, and very, obviously very timely. And I think I appreciate you kind of changing with what we need for today. I mean, it's so important to know what we need just right now today, right? So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie. I really appreciate it and always love conversations with you.
Oh, thank you. I love the tips that Heather gave us today, especially in the time that we're in right now and what we need to adjust in how you may normally think of budgeting and reduction of your debt and everything. You know, we're in a little bit of a different time now. And I think it's become clear to a lot of us how unprepared we were. And so I appreciate her focus on savings and working to create a larger savings versus debt pay down at this very moment. It's not that reducing debt isn't important, but right now take advantage of minimum payments and put more in savings so that you're really building up a good cushion for you for the future, doing what you can with what you have right now. I like that we talked about working in percentages a little bit. When it came to giving, that 10% is 10%, no matter what your pay is. And that giving is just, it's an act of obedience to God. And when you continue to act in obedience, God blesses you in many ways. And know for me personally, I have seen that over and over in my life. Well, I thank Heather for her time today. I'll definitely put her tips in the show notes and the link to her new Facebook group, Created for More. And I'll see you in there because I'm going to go join her group right now.